Now on BBC One, later than originally billed, Stargazing with Patrick Moore.
Good evening. Look on the cover of the Information Summary's Astronaut Fact Book and you will find this quote. Man must rise above the Earth, to the top of the atmosphere and beyond, for only thus will he fully understand the world in which he lives. Who said that? Socrates, BC 500. Well, since then we've had men on the moon. Remember Neil Armstrong's one small step onto the Sea of Tranquility. And last month, up went the first permanent crew members of the International Space Station. Two Russians, Gudzenko Ryukolev, and Captain William Shepard, who proposed to call the space station Alpha. Well, the sky at night is 43 years old. We began before the space age started in 1957, and now it's a good time to welcome a man who's been on 5 flights into space, taken part in some very, very important missions, and it's a great honor to have him here, Astronaut Jeffrey Hoffman. Jeffrey, welcome to the sky at night.
Patrick, we've known each other for years and we've talked about doing something together. I'm absolutely delighted that we could finally do it, and then I'm here to work with you.
Jeffrey, you're basically an astronomer. What took you into space?
Gosh, even before you started doing the sky at night, I was visiting the Hayden Planetarium in New York City with my father. We went to see the shows every month. And I got very excited about everything having to do with space, both astronomy and space travel, which of course in those days was just something that people thought about. I could have gotten interested in becoming an astronaut, except there was no such thing at the time. But there were astronomers, and that was probably a more realistic career prospect in any case, and that's what I did become. But when NASA in the 70s put out a call for astronauts to work on the space shuttle, and not just test pilots, but scientists and engineers, I knew that that's really what I wanted to do, and I was lucky enough to get selected.
The training's pretty rigorous, isn't it?
Oh gosh, it was several years of basic training, and then you have to learn all about the shuttle, the systems. There's physical training, there's textbook training. It's a long, hard road.
What was your first mission?
Well, I flew in 1985 on what was supposed to be kind of a milk run, basically taking 2 communication satellites into orbit, kicking them out of the shuttle. That's what we were doing in those days, mostly. And then coming back. We were only supposed to be up there for 4 days. As it turned out, one of the satellites did not turn itself on, and so our mission unexpectedly turned into a rescue mission involving what was in fact the first unplanned spacewalk that NASA ever did, and I was one of the 2 astronauts who had been trained to use spacesuits, so I got actually to go outside, and we built some special tools. We didn't have anything really to go up and fix the satellite with, but we had a go at it, and it was really quite exciting.
Did it work?
Well, had it been a movie made in Hollywood, it definitely would have worked. In fact, the little switch which we were able to activate turned out not to be the main cause. The main cause was deep inside the satellite. It was a multiple failure of several switches at the same time. But given the knowledge that we got from our attempt, NASA and the satellite manufacturing company were able to design some special tools, and another crew went up 4 months later, recaptured the satellite, and actually hot-wired it, and it's still in operation today.
Was one of your most important missions was to repair the Hubble Space Telescope, wasn't it?
Well, you know, as an astronomer and an astronaut, to be able to take my hands and touch the Hubble was one of the most exciting things I've ever done. But of course, it was not just exciting for me, it was extremely important for the astronomical community, for NASA, because so many hopes had been pinned on Hubble, so much money invested in it. Had we not been able to repair it, I think the history of NASA over the last 10 years would have been very bleak indeed.
I'm sure it would have been. When did you realize it really was going to work?
Well, you know, there were 2 aspects. Yeah. We had been given about a dozen different rather complex tasks to perform with Hubble. And on the 5th of the 5 days of spacewalking, I remember floating in after taking off our spacesuits with my colleague Story Musgrave, and we realized that everything we had been asked to do, despite all the doubts that this was too complex a mission, we had really done it, and we sort of just reached out and we hugged each other. We were so happy. But we didn't know if the optical corrections that we put in were really going to do the trick, and that wasn't until really the end of the month. In fact, it was New Year's Eve, and I was just cleaning up from our party down in Houston when the phone rang. It was about 2 o'clock in the morning, and it was some of my friends at the Space Telescope Science Institute who had just gotten the first pictures, and they had seen that in fact it really did work, and they said, we have to call up someone from the crew. Who do we know? Who knows somebody's number? And one of my astronomer friends said, well, let's call up Jeff. And so I got that call. They said, Jeff, do you have any champagne left? And I said, well, yeah, we have about a half bottle. They said, well, let's drink a toast together. So that was a great way to bring in the new year.
We certainly owe you a debt. It was an amazing achievement, Jeffrey. Many, many congratulations.
And of course, Hubble has gone on to fulfill all the expectations that anybody had of it.
But for you, it wouldn't have happened. Now, people ask, what about the sky from space? What are the view of the stars when you're actually out in space? People always asking that.
Very interesting. I've actually had people ask me, well, you know, you're closer to the stars, so can you see more of them? Of course, you're not that much closer. We're a few hundred kilometers above the surface, and the stars are many, many light years away, so they're trillions of kilometers away. But in fact, when you look at the stars, what you really see in terms of the number of stars, you don't see very much more than you would see from a mountaintop in a dark desert. You can see several thousand stars. The picture that we see here is a picture that I took of the constellation Orion, and there were some ultraviolet telescopes which I had taken up on another one of my missions. What you notice, which is different in space, is that the stars don't twinkle. Yeah. And of course that's because it's the atmosphere which makes the stars twinkle, and we're looking at the stars with no atmosphere, which is really quite extraordinary.
But you can see the atmosphere below you, can't you?
Well, and in fact, at night, the atmosphere is really rather strange. About 100 kilometers above the Earth, there's a glowing layer of atmosphere. It's nitrogen and oxygen atoms which have been excited during the day by sunlight and which give off radiation, and they form a greenish, brownish halo which surrounds the nighttime Earth, which is a truly extraordinary thing to see. You look at this picture, you can see that line. It almost looks like that line is the horizon, but if you look very closely, you can see a few stars between that halo and the Earth. So that, and in fact, when those stars are that close to the Earth, you're actually looking at them through the atmosphere. So for just a few seconds before those stars set or when they're rising, you can see them twinkle.
And the right side of the picture, you see the Southern Cross.
That's right. That's one of the other unique things about looking at the sky at night when you're in orbit, because you're going around the Earth, you know, every 90 minutes. So you may start your nighttime in the northern hemisphere, look out and see the Northern Cross, Cygnus the Swan, and then 20 minutes later you're in the southern hemisphere and you can see the Southern Cross, and that's something, of course, you can't do from any place on the surface of the Earth.
Now, one thing I can't really take in, the idea of seeing our own sun against a totally black sky. That must be uncanny.
It's ghostly. I mean, the sun exists in a blue sky. Everybody knows that. It's our human experience from the time we're children, and to actually look and see the sun in a black sky goes against all your intuition. I have some pictures to illustrate that, and just to set the scene, this is the Hubble Telescope, and in the process of repairing it, we were standing on the end of or floating on the end of the manipulator arm. There you can see me with the red stripe around my legs, and when I looked back at the shuttle, the scene that I saw is here with the sun against a totally black sky. You can look and actually understand that the sun is a star. You see it in a black sky just like all the other stars, although of course it's very, very bright, much brighter than any other star.
But you can see the blue sky.
Well, yes, of course in space everything is black, and it's the blackest black you can ever see. But when you look back towards the Earth, over the horizon, you can see the blue sky. This is an image taken through a telephoto lens of the Himalayas, and I like it because you can really see how the blue sky gradually gets darker and darker, and then it blends up into the total blackness of space. But as I say, this was taken through a telephoto lens. If you look at a picture taken with a regular lens, which is the way the human eye sees it, what's extraordinary is how thin this blue line is. If you look right at the horizon, it's this very, very almost invisible blue line, and you go outside and you look up at the sky, and it's this big blue sky, and yet when you see it from above, from outside, it's just this tiny thin little line. I think it makes you stop and think, because it's just that thin blue line, which is all that separates us from the hostile vacuum of space, and that's what permits life to live on the Earth.
What about sunrise and sunset from space? That must be spectacular.
Oh yeah, I mean that's another atmospheric phenomena which we get. That comes from our blue sky when the setting sun shines through it, and I love sunrises and sunsets. I take lots of pictures of them, and in fact the NASA photography picture always said that we can tell when Jeff Hoffman's been on a shuttle flight, because the pictures come back and almost half of them are sunrises and sunsets. But I never get tired of it, and they're all different, because, for instance, here is a sunset, and you can see all the different layers, the orange, the yellow, the white, the blue, but every time you go around the Earth, and of course we do that 16 times every 24 hours, so you get to see 32 sunrise sunsets every day.
Are the colors really as vivid as that when you see them?
Absolutely. And they change from time to time depending on the atmospheric conditions. For instance, you may have a time when there's a lot of storms, or when there's been a lot of agricultural burning. Or I remember on my third flight, it had been just after the eruption of Mount Pinatubo, and when you look at this next image of the sunset, you can see a kind of a dark bluish black line towards the bottom, and that's caused by the volcanic eruption. On that flight we flew right over this chain of, this is an extraordinary picture, I think, of the whole chain of Indonesian volcanoes on the island of Java.
Obviously, your view of the Earth does depend largely upon atmospheric conditions.
Absolutely. In fact, after the Pinatubo erupted, for several months, between about 20 degrees north and south latitude, it was pretty much hopeless to try to take a clear picture of the surface of the Earth. On the other hand, when the atmosphere cleared and you look straight down, you can see, for instance, a picture here that I took flying over the Nile Valley. It's extraordinary the detail you can see. I mean, it certainly is not just the Great Wall of China that you can see from space. I mean, you can see agricultural fields, you can see roads, you can see contrails of airplanes, you can see railroad tracks. The detail is extraordinary as long as you're looking straight down, because in order to get the contrast, you can't look through too much atmosphere, or else the light gets scattered. Looking down when you're flying over a city, you get extraordinary views of the buildings, of the streets, but as the cities move away from you and get closer and closer to the horizon, during the daytime at least, the scattering of the light takes away all the contrast and all the detail, and so that by the time that you're looking towards the Earth's horizon at a big picture, you see very little of the details.
What about the view at night?
Then it's different, because cities become points of light, just like stars, and we have no trouble seeing stars when they're close to the horizon, because the contrast against the blackness is so great, and it's the same with cities. That's one of the extraordinary things about looking at the Earth at night. I took some videos on the Hubble mission, because we launched at night, so we saw the entire northern hemisphere of the Earth at night. Flying over southern Europe, you can see the lights of Sicily, of Rome, all the lights that define human civilization, the boot of Italy. And you can see them all the way out to the horizon. We flew over the Nile Delta, and just as we could see the Nile during the day as defining the realm of life, at night you can see this ribbon of light following the river.
Amazing.
When we flew over the United States, of course, after a long flight across a very dark Pacific, it was great to see the ribbon of light coming up, which is the west coast of California, and you can see San Francisco Bay and Los Angeles, and Las Vegas is outrageously bright. I mean, you could see the Strip with your naked eye. And we were extraordinarily lucky that we got a picture of a meteor entering the atmosphere. Usually when you look down, you see about a couple of meteors every day. The first time I saw a meteor, it was very strange because, I mean, I recognized it as a meteor. I've seen lots of meteors, but it was below me. And so first I said, that's a meteor. And then I said, no, it can't be a meteor, it's below me. And then, of course, it hit me. This was on my first flight. It really gave me my sense of place where I was.
The sky glows too, but the shuttle itself glows.
Well, as you enter the night, you see a lot of interesting phenomena. When the shuttle is moving through the very, very thin residual atmosphere that's even at several hundred kilometers above the Earth, it hits atoms which cause this very ethereal glow. I mean, it's spooky. You can see it when you're low enough. You can actually see it with your naked eyes. In fact, on one of my missions, we specially took the shuttle down to about 200 kilometers, a little over 200 kilometers, just to study this phenomena. The other nice thing you see in this picture, you can see one of the jets on the shuttle is firing, and you get a purple glow coming out the side, and that's another one of the phenomena which you see. There's a lot of these phenomena which are related to just being on the shuttle.
And because you've got the aurora too.
Well, this picture is fascinating for several reasons. First of all, you can see our engines firing on the back of the shuttle. You can see a little bit of glow off the tail, and then you see this extraordinary view of the aurora. The aurora is just a magnificent sight, whether you're on the ground or in an airplane. But from space, of course, you have this very unique perspective, which is one of the things that makes space flight such a special experience.
Well, Jeffrey, you've achieved a great deal. You've seen more than most people. Now, sitting here in the studio, do you find it hard to believe you've really been in space?
Well, of course, looking at the pictures we're showing makes it a little bit easier. I guess I've spent a total of about 50 days in space, and fortunately the experience is so intense and overwhelming that if I work hard and I close my eyes, I can bring back what it looked like. I wish I could really bring back what it felt like floating, because the feeling of being weightless and having this total freedom, physical freedom, is such an extraordinary thing. I think it's one of the reasons why astronauts want to go back and just get more of it.
Well, Jeffrey, you've achieved so much. It's been a tremendous honor to have you with us. Thank you indeed for coming. Many, many thanks.
Patrick, it's been a great pleasure.
Don't forget our website, www.bbc.co.uk/Sky@Night, or, of course, CFAX page 620. And since this is the last Sky at Night of the present millennium, perhaps it's not too early to wish you all a very happy Christmas. Good night.